March 21st, 2011 meeting of the Agenda Charter Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Barker? Here. Mr. Eckel? Here. Mr. Esposito? Here. Mr. Howland? Here. Chairman Yulovich?
Here. Is there anyone signed up to speak in the public forum?
Yes. When I call your name, please come forward to the podium. You will have 2 minutes and only 2 minutes in which to address the committee. Please conclude when the buzzer sounds. Thank you. The first speaker is Mac McGonigal. Okay.
I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me to speak to maybe push on this good initiative that I think is on the table. There's actually two of them. The first one, and I have it all written up on one sheet, Office of Public Integrity. I support creating an Office of Public Integrity in Monroe County because the current administration lacks the ability to have and enforce a system of internal controls and internal audits, as evidenced by their need to have outside organizations like the Democrat and Chronicle tell them when there are problems. Why is it that normal management review and approval processes failed to put the brakes on cigars and lap dances? Who approved the expense report, and are they still employed? There's a lot of people in the legislature that have their own businesses. This wouldn't occur in your business, and you know it. Why is it occurring in our county? Why is it that simple supervising and managing failed to highlight Robotron? I turn in some Freedom of Information requests, but it is a little bit frustrating. I've turned in many of them, some just asking for a copy of an internal audit schedule. And I think I've got requests in recently and also a few years ago. But the bottom line is they all get turned down. So I don't know what this shroud of secrecy is. So I guess I would ask this committee to push this important issue forward for review and consideration. The public needs to have a process to protect their tax dollars. The second one that's on the table is the bipartisan work group for taxpayer protection. And in my mind, this is pretty much a no-brainer. Since there has never has been a document since in the last 6 years that I've been looking at the budget, that there's never been a document that shows compliance to this act as spelled out by the Monroe County Charter. The only thing the county offers each year is a statement in the budget letter that says, guess what, folks, we comply. Shouldn't this act be important? The committee should push this initiative forward for review and consideration. The very last comment that I would make about this, just as an analogy, is my youngest daughter happened to be home from spring break this past week, and when I wanted to take her out, she says, I don't know, I've got a project to. I said, well, why don't you use the Monroe County administration strategy on this project? She said, well, what's that? I said, well, all you have to do is write an email to your professor and tell them that you completed the project to, as spelled out in the requirements, and guess what? I happen to get an A. So that's the Monroe County process. That's what we see in the introductory letter that Maggie Brooks puts into the budget, in advance of the budget. So all it says in there is we comply. There's nothing in there that actually shows compliance. So I guess I would push both of these initiatives forward. Thanks.
The next speaker is Joyce Herman.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And when I told a couple folks that I was going to come to speak about the Office of Public Integrity, they said, you're wasting your time. They're not going to listen to you. And all they care about is doing things for themselves or their friends. Well, I don't think so. I don't think so. Call me naive. But I didn't come here to insult either party. I believe that there is a place where everybody who is here has made a decision to run for public office, to be part of of the administration, to be part of the government of this county, because they care. They want Monroe County to be a good place, a place where human beings and where we can thrive, and a place we can be proud of. So, I think this is at a time, of huge crisis. I don't have to tell you, in our county, in our country, and in the world. And I'm going to ask for your attention just for one more minute. And that is to say that actually with all the distress that's going on and all of the distrust that people have for government, you at this moment have an opportunity to actually do something that can restore trust. You can make something good happen, and it isn't going to matter which party is in power in the future. If you establish a powerful and impartial Office of Public Integrity, you can be part of restoring integrity and restoring trust in this community. So I'm asking you to be leaders, to do what leaders do. That is to think of the good of the whole. Don't do something that's just going to give you cover and make you look good. Allow your caring for what happens to this community to come forward. And let this be a first step in restoring integrity and making us really proud of what could be a great county and a great community. And I think we all want that. Thank you.
The next speaker is Kevin Yost.
Good evening. I'm going to have to disagree and say that the Office of Public Integrity is a moot point. The county executive already put in a new procedure where county employees, once they're hired, or those who've been hired now have to go through a process where they review the ethics laws that are already on the books and have to sign them, or if they violate them, they lose their job. So therefore, the Office of Public Integrity is a moot point and would waste taxpayers' dollars. Why reinvent the wheel? I would, however, support the county enacting something similar to the Federal Hatch Act, where federal employees cannot contribute to that act as enacted and written. Federal employees cannot contribute to their employers' campaigns, and I would ask that the county legislature do enact something similar where county employees and contractors cannot contribute to the campaigns of those elected officials at the county level that they work for. Thank you.
The last speaker is Tom Gregory.
Well, I should start by thanking Legislator Andrews and, of course, Legislator Esposito for all the challenges they bring in here and the ideas they bring here, which have actually compelled me to do a lot of studies, and thank you. I'm learning a lot about county government because of your initiatives. But I don't obviously agree with this proposal for the reason that from my studies, when we start to look at the alternative county law, and we look at the county law, and we look at the process that this legislature back in 1965 went through to develop these offices of county executive and later on make our county manager, and later on make our county manager a elected official. And when we look at all the thought that has gone into county government, we realize that it's not an accident that we have the government we have. We actually have good government because a long time ago, many people took a lot of interest to build programs and redundancies, which the public doesn't hear about too often in the reporting. But for example, in finance, there's a committee called an audit committee that's made up of 3 outside of the administration, outside of the legislature, individuals who are certified in public accounting, in that particular case, in the finance. So we have a lot of redundancy. When we look at the way the county executive is held to task by this legislative body, and I think one thing we have to always keep in mind is that it is in this chamber, even though we have an elected county executive, in this chamber is the ultimate authority of this county, has the ultimate purview over everything that goes on in this county. And basically to have someone checking up on this chamber is a way of saying, to me at least, that maybe this chamber doesn't want to do its job. I said about 6 months ago, and I remember because I got 2 smiles, the last 2 smiles I've seen from Legislator Andrews and Legislator Esposito, that I was happy to see them back over here because they're the young blood. They're the future of politics, of government in this country. Of course, I shouldn't imply that everybody on the Republican side is old, but the point being, I know, oh, well, we know, Mr. Yolovich. But the bottom line is that it's my point. Bottom line is that the activity that I have watched in committees and throughout the legislative cycle for the last years, especially with the new Democratic side and that there, and I've seen your challenging. I've heard your questions asked. I've watched you direct questions through the president to the administration, and I've watched the administration struggle. And I'll tell you one thing, the best guarantee that we have for honest, open, transparent county government won't be an individual who we give the ultimate job of being God or a county God, but it's going to reside right here in this legislative chamber, in the very people that I'm looking at right now. You are the integrity. You are the transparency. You are the guarantee that we'll have a good county government, not only during your cycle, but in later cycles to follow you. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone present who has not signed up to speak who would like to do so? Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. You have the January 24th, 2011 minutes before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next item on the agenda is new business. And before you start, Madam Chair, just let me say a little something. My mic's not on? Thought my mic was on. Can you hear me? I guess my mic was not. I apologize, folks. I got a pretty loud voice anyway, but at least it's not on the tape. I got a call over the weekend, and I had thought that the way I run a committee, and most of you know me for the last 6 years, that you all understood how I run a committee. And I got a call requesting or wanting to make sure that the the author of the resolution would be able to speak. And I didn't return the call because I knew I didn't have to. But the fact is that, let me be very clear, I always allow the author of the resolution to speak, and Vinnie can attest to that. And after that, I ask the author of the resolution not to speak anymore unless questioned by the opposing side. And that's the way I've run it. I've been very consistent, and that's the way I'd like to run it tonight. So by saying all that, Casey, go ahead and start your...
Okay. Referral 11-48, establishing a bipartisan work group to study the impact of mandates for potential cost savings and efficiencies.
Moved by Legislator Eckel, seconded by Legislator Esposito. Legislator Andrews, would you like to speak?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening to this motion. I think it was a few years ago in 2008 when we convened a bipartisan budget work group. The group met a few times. I don't think we necessarily all agreed on the charge of the group when we started our work, but we did work together for a few sessions. And I know that I personally thought that that was a really nice opportunity to learn more about the budget and the problems that the county faces through the budget process outside the confines of the regular budget debate, when there was more give and take and it wasn't quite as structured as it is here in the regular committee process that we go through in November and December when we review the budget. Also, most importantly, as a result of the work group's work, we did pass 2 bipartisan budget referrals, which I think attempted to increase transparency in the county's finances. One was dealing with having the auditors come annually to present to Ways and Means, and then the other made some changes in the presentation of the key indicator report. In my 6 years here, that's the only bipartisan work group that we've ever put together, and I think that perhaps now we have an opportunity for a new group. As we all know, in 2007, we passed the Taxpayer Protection Act, and that act limits growth in non-mandated spending to the rate of the increase in the CPI. We spend each year, I'm sure all of you will attest, an inordinate amount of time discussing this act and the Taxpayer Protections Act application to the budget. We discuss the differences between mandated and non-mandated categories of spending. We discuss the shifts between these categories. We've discussed at length the emergence of new categories throughout the past few years, whether it be debt service, payment to municipal sharing partners, the non-mandated user fee category that appeared. And then we've discussed last year, especially the sort of a new definition, much looser definition of what constitutes mandated spending. And there's sort of been an evolution in this law and its application to the county's budget. It started off as being presented as very black or white in terms of what would be mandated and what's non-mandated, and it's morphed and changed year to year. So because of all this, and because it takes so much time in November and December to discuss this law, which we all pay a great deal of attention to, I thought it would be a worthy topic for us to devote some attention to outside of the budget period, so that in the budget period we can focus really in on the programs, the spending, and the priorities that the county executive has outlined for the upcoming year. Certainly the administration is charged with presenting a budget which is in compliance of the Taxpayer Protection Act, but nothing stops the legislators ourselves as a co-equal branch of government from reviewing our budget, or the budget that we adopt, and then reviewing what constitutes mandated spending in that budget. So this proposal, if passed, would establish a bipartisan work group consisting of 4 legislators, 2 from each side, and they would review the spending that's listed in the current 2011 budget as mandated. And I think that they would identify the spending that's mandated, and then most importantly, really try to get down to, 1, why is it mandated? I mean, what federal, state regulation does that spring from? And then 2, if it's mandated, is it funded? Is it a funded mandate, or is it an unfunded mandate? Because you hear these words thrown around all the time to talk about the mandates imposed on county government and other levels of government as well. But I think the most important piece really is what portion of that mandated spending is funded. Because if a government's telling you you have to do something, and they're also providing the resources for you to do it, arguably that's less of a problem than when a government tells you you have to do something but doesn't provide the funding for you to do it. And I think that that should really be our focus when we delve into what's mandated spending. And so this group, if we authorize it this evening, and I'm certainly open to input from any legislator who would participate in the work group, in terms of how we would proceed. It would issue a report to the legislature after 3 months of starting its work. I think it's probably been over a decade or so, at least since about the mid-90s, since we've had a formal report from one of the committees. And I think that this bipartisan group could do some great work outside the structure that we have here in this chamber, and just work together to try to get a better understanding about the problems that we really all face together, regardless of which side of the aisle we're on, when we talk about the county budget and what we want to do in the upcoming years. So I hopefully encourage my colleagues to support this, and I look forward to working with them on it. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Legislator Esposito?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you extending the courtesy to the maker of the referral, and that is something you have always done. And just so you know, it was my suggestion she call you as a non-member of the committee. I think it's always good practice to call the chairman when you plan.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. But I think she understood.
Yeah, it was by no means an indication that you wouldn't allow her to speak had she shown up. So I appreciate that opportunity, and I commend Legislator Andrews for bringing forward this proposal. She was one of the people who spearheaded the bipartisan group we had a couple years ago to address the budget, and resulted in a couple of those referrals that improved the operations of this county in dealing with the budget. And this is another one. I know that there is a lot of attention paid to mandated versus non-mandated and unfunded mandates, and for great reason. The Taxpayer Protection Act has a very laudable intent, but it has gotten blurred in many, many ways in the last few years, and it would be to the benefit of everyone in this county, particularly everyone in this legislature, if we work together to decide what is and what is not applicable to that act. Since the Taxpayer Protection Act was passed by this body and overwhelmingly approved by the voters of this county in 2007, there have been many requests to the administration to provide a list of what items in the budget are mandated and what is the mandating entity. It's a very fundamental thing. And to my knowledge, since that act was enacted, that list has never been provided. So through you, Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask the administration if they have a list of mandates and non-mandates in the county programs, in the county budget, and if that list has been provided to this legislative body.
Mr. Chairman, I would have to defer to the Budget Office on the existence of such a list or what form it might be. I'd be glad to check into that. In terms of the submission of the budget, as the legislator knows, it is according to mandated and non-mandated services.
I appreciate that. I would like to request through you, Mr. Chairman, that if a list does exist, I would like this legislature to see it, and I would also assume that one has to exist. In order for the county executive to put percentages on every program and every department of this county's budget in terms of what's mandated and what's not, as she's obligated to do through the Taxpayer Protection Act, each aspect and each line of that budget has to be determined to be mandated or not somewhere. And this legislature should be privy to that information. And if it exists, I'd like it. And if it exists, we should enact this bipartisan work group to go through it, to make sure it's accurate based on the legislature's prerogative, based on the body that actually passed the Taxpayer Protection Act. And if it doesn't exist, then this body should get together in a bipartisan fashion and craft that list. It is, as I said before, fundamental to determine if we're abiding by the Taxpayer Protection Act, which I can tell you has been so questioned and so controversial in the last few years that we are inviting and opening our whole county budget process up open to legal scrutiny that it might not stand up against. And I don't know what would happen if that were to occur, but to put the county's budget in jeopardy because we're moving things around from year to year and not adhering to the law of this county, the Taxpayer Protection Act, is some sort of ambiguity we shouldn't live with. We should get clarity. We should work together to get that clarity. And I urge my colleagues on this committee to vote in favor of this referral for that reason. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Legislator Echo, would you like a couple of minutes? Well, you were choking over there.
I'm fine.
I've had that cough for four weeks, so I know what you're going through.
My comments often have that effect on Steve.
If you need a couple of minutes, we can take it.
Thank you.
Okay. Would you like to speak?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your offering me a couple of minutes to get my throat together. As my colleague has said, Mr. Esposito has said, this is a very important thing that we have been discussing for many, many years. What is mandated? What is not mandated? How does this work? And we found that we've never really come down to a proper definition. Now, these definitions are bandied about quite a bit, or these words are bandied about quite a bit. I think what we need to do is all get together and get on the same page between the administration and both sides of this esteemed chamber to discuss and figure out what is mandated, what is non-mandated, what is funded, what is unfunded, what is partially funded, and what do each one mean? Because if you define what a mandate is something that the state requires you to do. For an example, MCC, which has been called a mandated expense, there's nothing in the state charter that says we have to have a community college. Now, I love our community college, and I think it should be funded to much more than it actually is. But the fact is, since there's nothing in the state charter that says we have to have one, why is it called mandated? Just because it's open. Well, it's open now. We have to pay to keep it open. Therefore, it's mandated. No, that's not the. Is that the definition of mandated, or is it not? The sheriff's office. We are mandated to have a sheriff, but we're not mandated to have an entire sheriff's office. What part of the sheriff's office are we calling mandated? What part are we not calling mandated? How much of that is funded? If we look at the funded versus unfunded, if we can by our definitions, a much smaller percentage of our budget is actually unfunded mandate. As we call it a mandate. 82%, I believe, was the last number that was thrown out, is mandated. But how much of that is funded? How much of it is not funded? What portion of that are we actually talking about? Are we talking about $800 million that is unfunded mandate or just mandated? We need definitions, and we need to figure out what is going on so we can all talk about it and all come to a conclusion together, rather than taking a great deal of time in our meetings discussing what each one means. Let's get this group together. Let's pass this resolution, which is a great resolution and a great chance for us to work together and to come up with answers to these questions that continually come up. And so we can all be on the same page. And I think that would be, this would be a great way for the two sides to work together and say, this is what the county is doing, and this is what we are seeing. And that way, we can all work together using the same definitions to move forward with our great county. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Legislator Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that the idea of a commission such as this, again, is another layer that takes the place of these committees. We ask these questions. When the budget comes around, we ask these questions in these committees. The idea that we're going to get a commission, a bipartisan commission of 8 people together that's going to get the definitions right when the budget director gives a definition that the other side doesn't agree with, I don't see how that's going to be affected by sitting down in a commission where they can argue and not believe the definition that the budget director gives. The give and take that's in these committees when we go through the budget is what we're elected to do. And I don't want to give up my power to a commission to make these definitions. I think it's part of the committee process. I'm going to vote against this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Opposed. Motion fails.
Okay.
Next item.
Next item is referral 11-49, creation of an Office of Public Integrity to combat public corruption and to restore and strengthen the public's faith in county government.
Moved by Legislator Eckel. Seconded by Legislator Esposito. Legislator Andrews, would you like to speak to the motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's evident from one of the speakers who spoke tonight that it is apparent these days that a lot of the public has lost faith in its elected and public officials. And I think this is unfortunate because I truly do believe that the vast majority of us, elected officials, public officials, county employees, civil servants in all areas of government, are here to do work on behalf of the public to the best of our abilities, and we do that work honorably. But that doesn't mean at this point that there's not a problem with the perception of how we're doing our work. And I think it's vitally important at this point in time that we work to restore the public's trust in its government. One way to do that is to be as transparent and forthcoming about our dealings as possible and to provide more rather than less information. So the proposal that's before you today for your vote is to establish an Office of Public Integrity here in Monroe County. Over the past couple of years, the county executive has taken several actions in response to problems that have emerged during her tenure. Recently, a couple of years ago, she established a whistleblower hotline operated by an independent accountability council, which is a local law firm. But that independent accountability council reports directly to her office, creating the perception that it could be very easy to infuse politics into the solution for any given ethical problem. Apparently, also, this office or this independent accountability council is shielded by attorney-client privilege. Over a month ago, I submitted a letter to the administration with some questions, some of them just fairly statistical questions in nature, such as the number of cases opened by the Independent Accountability Council, the number of cases that have been investigated by this council and that were referred to law enforcement. I asked for the number of reports received by the county's whistleblower hotline, the number of these reports that were investigated and found credible, and what steps were taken, and then the total cost to maintain the whistleblower hotline. Even the response that I received just recently to that letter asking for that information was that all of my information request was denied because it was privileged and confidential. You know, as co-partners here in this government, that doesn't seem to me to be information that should be confidential. I mean, how are we supposed to know how we're doing with this Independent Accountability Council and the whistleblower hotline if we can't find out any information about how it's operating? I mean, have we received 5 calls since it started, or 500? I mean, and if there have been 500 reports that have been made, have 5 of them been credible, or 2 of them, or 400 of them? And what sort of steps have been taken to remedy the issues that have been brought up? I mean, is it a total waste of time, or is it actually productive? And without getting information when I request it about this Independent Accountability Council, it's hard to really understand what it's doing and see whether or not it's doing an effective job. So I think at this point in time, it's time, and the public wants and should be given more information. So the Office of Public Integrity proposal, I'll just go through a few of what it calls for. It asks for a director to report to an independent board, not to the county executive's office, to try to remove the perception that politics may interfere with these issues. It also would investigate allegations of abuse, misuse of funds, or wrongdoing. It could work with the current whistleblower hotline and the Independent Accountability Council, or perhaps restructure or take over and make that a more transparent operation. The office could initiate periodic reviews of any county department, local development corporation, or any public authority that's created by the county. Again, this would be proactive rather than responsive. This would be us taking a step to defer wrongdoing in the county rather than just reacting when something happens. And this could actually serve as a deterrent to those who would consider committing crimes. The office could issue policy recommendations to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse, and work with law enforcement as necessary for whatever would be appropriate, as well as to recover misused funds. I would ask that the office report to the legislature on a biannual basis. Again, an overview of its activities, perhaps like some of the information I requested, or previously mentioned that I had requested, not the specifics of every case. Of course, some of this stuff has to be handled confidentially to protect the person who blows the whistle or who reports an allegation of wrongdoing. So we're not asking for the specifics, but just to have a general understanding of what this office would be doing is something I think we're entitled to. Lastly, this proposal, if passed tonight, would create a task force to see if there's an interest or a need in the community overall, in all of Monroe County, in establishing a municipal office of public integrity that could serve the whole community. And maybe this wouldn't work, but maybe it would. It's something that would be collaborative. It's kind of creative, and we could explore and go down the route of seeing if that's something that the towns, villages, school districts, or any other level of government would be interested in doing with us. The funding for this proposal really begins in the 2011 budget with I believe it's over $100,000 that was allocated for the Director of Budget position. So that position is funded but vacant at this point in time, so that would be sort of the starting place to find funding. And then the proposal, if passed, would call for the Office of Public Integrity to be operational by 2012. So we would have to find a way between now and 2012 to fund the office on top of the starting $100,000. Certainly, there's really no magic solution, and I don't believe the Office of Public Integrity would solve everything, but I do believe that it's a step in the right direction. It's an idea, it's been tried in some places, it's a more comprehensive approach. It works to re-earn the public's trust, as one of the speakers said this evening. And I do believe it's something that should be explored by this body, and I hope that there'll be support for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Andrews. Legislator Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, Legislator Andrews, I've got some questions on the proposal. First of all,
Mr. Chairman indicated I was done speaking after I spoke, so am I given permission to respond to the...
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So now I can respond.
I did add that in my statement, that you're allowed to answer any questions from the opposing side.
But not by my own colleagues if they were to ask a question?
That is correct. They had plenty of time to ask you before.
Mr.
I've always
Chairman.
done that before, and That's the way it stands. I let you go after a dare.
After, wow. Well, Legislator Andrews, I'm not going.
I really believe I've been consistent about that.
But I assume, though, that if Legislator Esposito had a question for me about this proposal, he could ask me the question and I would answer it, correct?
No.
No, so only legislators on the opposite
That's
side
correct.
of the aisle
I
can
stated
ask
that right at the
questions?
beginning, yep.
But
That's
how
the
is
way
that
we've
a-
always done it, that's the way I've done it before. You
How is
can
that
check
possibly
back,
fair?
look at the tapes, whatever the case might be. It's very simple. It would be an opportunity for you to further your statement after you've given it, and we're not going to do that. We're not going to get into a big fight about this. This is the way it is. I make the rules. I stated them at the beginning, and I've been very consistent about that over the years.
I'd just like to be on the record saying I think that's a bit absurd that I could answer a
You're-
question from
you're perfectly
Legislator
welcome
Barker,
to feel
but
that
not
way, but
Legislator
this is the way it is.
Esposito. But-
They very well could have asked you questions before you came out here, if they needed them. Legislator Barker, please continue.
Oh, back to me. All right. Legislator Andrews, you mentioned that you looked at some other models when you drafted this. What other models did you look at?
Actually, the City of Rochester here, through the chair, has an Office of Public Integrity, and so we did look at how that office is run. And staff has done some research in, I believe it's Albany County and New York County that also have similar sorts of public integrity units.
Okay, I had read in the Democrat and Chronicle that you had used the City of Rochester Public Office as a model. Can you tell us some of the areas of responsibility that that office has within
Sure.
the city government?
And actually, I don't think I ever said I used that as a model. I think it's one. I think I used it as an example of one
It was
other.
referenced in the Democrat and Chronicle article?
Correct. It was referenced as one other Office of Public Integrity that exists locally. The Rochester's Office of Public Integrity is responsible for, it does programmatic audits and reviews of different departments. It responds to questions from commissioners. They use commissioners instead of department heads, I guess, as a title, in terms of any questions they have regarding conflicts of interest or what they should be doing. It also operates a whistleblower hotline and investigates complaints that are received, and it also issues policy recommendations in terms of any changes that it thinks the city should make in policies that would make it more effective.
So it has a whistleblower hotline similar to what we have currently?
It does have a whistleblower hotline. I don't know if it's similar because I don't know much about the one that we have because I haven't received any information about it.
Okay.
Let's go through the chair. Let's keep it on the up and up.
Through the chair. One of the areas of responsibility, the Rochester Public Office of Integrity, does that report to the City Council?
I believe the Rochester model actually reports to the mayor's office, and I believe they do receive, City Council receives updates as requested from the Office of Public Integrity from its director.
Through the chair, so the model that you wrote would have them report to us rather than the county executive, yet the City of Rochester reports to the mayor rather than to the City Council, correct?
I identified the Rochester Office of Public Integrity as an example of
Right,
one locally. So I didn't model ours after theirs. My proposal deals with one which I think would be better off reporting to an independent body to further diffuse any questions of whether or not politics are involved with ethical investigations.
Legislator Andrews, it works
Through
both
the
ways.
chair.
Thank you.
Through the chair, so would the City of Rochester model then be lacking because it just reports to the mayor? I believe you just said that would keep politics out of it if it reported to the council. Through the chair.
I think ideally the Office of Public Integrity through the chair should report to an independent independent board. I don't serve on City Council, so I'm not fully aware of how the city's Office of Public Integrity works. I do know, though, that the director does answer questions from City Council and provide information to City Council members. And I do know that when I've requested information here about our Independent Accountability Council, I have not received any answers to those questions.
Is the city office located in city property?
Through the chair, I do not believe it's located in City Hall.
City Hall. Do they rent or lease space? Any idea?
Through the chair, I'm
Through the
not
chair,
sure
sorry.
how they operate their building, but I also don't know how that's germane to the proposal to have the county create an Office of Public Integrity.
When we talk about the cost effectiveness through the budget, I was just wondering how the city does that. Through the chair, my next question was going to be, do you know how much they spend annually, the city of Rochester, on theirs, their Office of Public Integrity?
Through the chair, I don't have the budget for the city's Office of Public Integrity.
Okay, through my research, the last 2 years, they've spent over $500,000. In the current year, it's going to be over $600,000. So your referral calls your proposal cost effective. Could you explain through the chair how that would be cost effective if we were going to be spending $500,000 to $600,000 a year?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things that we don't do currently in the county, it appears to be, is proactive audits of different county departments. So as I said in my remarks prior, we respond when issues come up, but we haven't instigated programmatic audits or reviews of different departments to see if we're functioning effectively, or to see proactively if there are find problems that are out there. So one thing this Office of Public Integrity would be charged with doing is instigating those sorts of reviews. So I believe naturally when you instigate those sorts of reviews, you're going to find areas where there are problems. And so there's probably, as frequently discussed in terms of rooting out Medicaid fraud and waste and abuse, there's probably other sorts of fraud, waste, and abuse that are out there within the county that we would now be more likely to discover and therefore recover funds from or stop. So I do think that this office would have the high potential of then bringing in money to the county because it would discover things that are currently not being found.
Legislator Barker, if you'll allow me, I'm going to disagree with you there, Legislator Andrews, because there is an internal audit committee in the county, Monroe County Internal Audit Committee. I sit on it, so I know that it exists, and so does Paul Haney.
Thank you for that information.
Continue, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, does Albany County or the City of Rochester, does their Office of Public Integrity make their investigations open to the public through the FOIL system?
Through the chair, I don't believe that certain aspects of these investigations would be foilable, but I'm not sure off the top of my head, and I can't say I'm an attorney or that I've researched it. But I do believe, as I mentioned in my remarks before, that a lot of the work of this office does have to remain confidential to protect the individuals who are reporting allegations of misdoing.
Through the chair, and that's where I was trying to go with the question. My next question was going to be, because you mentioned that in your opening remarks, so then who is going to decide what will be foilable and what won't be? Whose job will that be? Through the chair.
Through the administration, through the chair, as this office gets set up, it's going to have to explore all the laws that will be applicable to it, and there'll have to be a decision made. I'm assuming the board that we would, the members that we would put on the board, the independent board that would oversee this, would have to have the background and information to be able to figure out how to comply with all applicable laws.
Okay, let's talk, through the chair, let's talk a little bit about the board as it would be complied. How do you envision these board members being chosen? Through the chair.
Through the chair, I believe the referral indicates that the minority party would appoint two, the majority party would appoint two, and the county executive would appoint one. So we would have to discuss within those three groups who are going to be making appointments how and who should be appointed. Ideally, they will not be elected officials. They will not be they will not be county employees. They will not be people who have anything at stake.
Thank you. Through the chair, perhaps I was not direct, and I wasn't thinking outside the box when I read this, but as I read it and I looked at the qualifications that this proposal lists, other than attorneys and CPAs, I couldn't come up with other people that might qualify for this particular board as written in the proposal. Can you help me with that? Who else would qualify?
Through the chair, would you like to offer
well, I was wondering
an
why
amendment?
public teachers couldn't, according to this position, public school teachers would not be allowed, the way that I read it, because they're part of the state pension fund. I thought that's how I interpreted it. Am I incorrect in that interpretation?
Sure, perhaps if you give me a few minutes to
Mr. Barker
review.
and Ms. Andrews has the floor.
I don't even remember where I saw that, but when I read it, all I could come up with was CPAs and attorneys. That's why I'm asking for clarification. could be wrong. Such board members shall not be employees or elected or appointed officials of New York State. So I read that to be if you're a teacher, that because you're an employee of New York State. Am I incorrect in that?
Through the chair, my understanding is if you're a teacher, you're not an employee of New York
Okay.
State. You're an employee of, I think in your case, Fairport Central School District.
Being
I
part of
don't-
the New York State retirement system, that was how I read that. I'm sorry if
Yeah,
I'm
this doesn't
incorrect.
mention the retirement system.
No, but that's, I guess, when I think of us, the fellow teachers, I think of that. So, so a teacher could be eligible to participate in this as well as anybody else, as long as they're not elected or appointed officials?
That's correct, as long as you're not an employee of any political subdivision in New York State, which my belief is teachers are not.
Okay. Would NICE agree with that?
I believe they would, through the chair.
Good, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Legislator Barker.
Would these board members, as appointed, have a fiduciary duty to the taxpayers of Monroe County?
Through the chair. Thank you.
Give me a chance, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, my belief is that yes, they would.
Okay. Through the chair, through the law, what other powers do you intend to grant to this Public Integrity Board? The way that I read it, all I could get was the only real power that they have is to hire or fire the director. Will we be fleshing it out, the powers that the board has, or is it strictly by what's in this proposal?
Through the chair, I mean, this is a real starting point here of establishing a board that would oversee the office. So because we thought that we wouldn't be able to flesh it out within 1 month time period, that's why the proposal calls for the office being established in 2012, which gives us about 8 months to work on all the details of how it's going to be put together and run. This just describes the powers and duties of the director of the office. And then the board, of course, would have to adopt its own bylaws and figure out itself how it's going to function.
Okay. The addition of towns and villages, as you mentioned, was just maybe pie in the sky, thinking of that. Could you explain more? Those are my words, not yours. But when you talked about that, what else were you envisioning with towns and villages? And would the city of Rochester be under this as well? Through the chair.
Through the chair, I don't want you to be confused by this referral. There's kind of two parts of it. One calls for the county to establish an Office of Public Integrity, and the second portion calls for a task force to be put together to study and figure out whether or not there's a need and a demand for a municipal Office of Public Integrity. And if so, if there's interest, and I don't know if there is because until it's passed, the task force doesn't exist to find out whether or not there's an interest. But the idea there would be that perhaps the city of Rochester does want to join with us, and perhaps there are efficiencies to be found in having one Office of Public Integrity for the entire county. And maybe the town of Greece is also interested, or the village of Pittsford, or Fairport Central School District, or some other governmental entity that wants to band together and say, okay, we want to contribute to maintaining this office and also have this office oversee and have some oversight powers over our level of government as well. So if we pass this referral, this Office of Public Integrity in Monroe County does not automatically get those powers. It just allows for us to establish a task force to explore.
I just wanted to see where you were what you were envisioning with this, and so you would leave it up to this task force?
Well, I think if the task force, if there were interested levels of government in the county, which I don't know if there are at this point in time, but if there were, it might be an area for them to band together and say, yes, let's have one office. Instead of all of us creating our little offices of public integrity, let's have one big one. Or maybe it's more cost effective because a little village or a little town can't afford or doesn't feel like they have the resources to establish an Office of Public Integrity, but they really think it's a great idea. But perhaps they could join in with a couple other towns, and then maybe there's enough towns that want to join in with the county, or however it goes, so that we at least explore doing something in a regional collaborative way. It just seems like in a time when there are dwindling resources, that if there's an area that we can work together with our partners and other levels of government, that we ought to at least pursue it.
Through the chair, the director of the Office of Public Integrity, what kind of qualifications do you envision this Director of Integrity having, and what would the pay range be that we would look at for this person? Through the chair.
Well, the pay range, I believe, would be established by the board, and then it would have to come before us. I mean, I think the director has to have, ideally would have experience in criminal background, would have experience in review and oversight and management of departments, and would be a trusted individual that would be able to put together a team of whether it's auditors or police officers or other folks that do that sort of line of work and oversee their work. Obviously be a trusted individual that we would empower to take on this responsibility.
Through the chair, and you don't see all of this happening with the current independent counsel that the county executive has, that you don't see all of this out there through the whistleblower program, and so because you don't see that, you want to add this extra layer of government that I see and that people that have come up and talked to me see. This is just a whole other layer of adding government at a time when we should be getting rid of layers of government. Through the chair.
Through the chair, I can certainly tell you that I don't see anything regarding the Independent Accountability Council because I don't get any answers to my questions regarding that office. So I can't speak to what they're doing. I can quote you, though, to the extent that requested information exists regarding cases handled by the Independent Accountability Council and reports made to the whistleblower hotline, such information is privileged and kept confidential pursuant to applicable law. That's the information I received from the county attorney. So I can't answer what they're doing, how they're doing it, how often they get phone calls, how often they get reports, how often they investigate, what they find, what they do, what's credible, what's not credible. I get absolutely no information about that. So I know for certain that that doesn't make me feel like I should just say, yeah, that office is working great because I haven't seen any indication that it is.
And through the chair, you know that in Albany County that Albany County legislators are able to do that, to get this access?
Through the chair, I'm just speaking for Monroe County. This is something that I feel we should deal with at this point in time. I can't speak to Albany County.
The proposal when you mentioned models Albany County, because if that's the case, because I do know that the city of Rochester does not offer that case, that their investigations, like the ones that we currently have, are kept confidential to protect whistleblowers. To go back to your earlier point about deciding what's confidential and what isn't, that's, I believe, the function of the county executive's office, like it is the mayor's office in the city. So if Albany County was doing something different, I think that that would be something that maybe would make for a different argument.
Through the chair, I haven't said anything about Albany County doing anything
I'm
differently.
Sorry, I thought that was used as a model.
I can speak to the fact, though, that if you talk to the city's Office of Public Integrity, I believe they would answer your question of how many phone calls have they received. I don't believe that's confidential. But that is confidential here, apparently. So that's my real issue here is, I mean, you asked me the question of whether or not I feel this is being done now. The answer to that question is I don't know, because the requests I've made for information, not about who's called in or not about what are they alleging, but just basic questions about what is this office doing and how many calls does it get and how many reports are made, none of that's been answered in the current system, so I don't feel like I have any information about what it's doing.
I'm sorry, through the chair, I used the Albany County because I thought that you had mentioned that as one of the models, so forgive me.
Excuse me, I'd like a point of information. She said reference, not modeled. There's a huge difference.
Okay.
And we know what it's like.
Through the chair, how is that? How do I know that?
If you reference it,
I mean, I've made, but because I misspoke, I'm sorry.
thank you.
But I had thought that Albany County was referenced as well, because I didn't want to just keep picking on the city of Rochester since you had looked at other models in the proposal. True.
When you reference something, you're saying like
Right.
this. When we're modeling something after, you're saying, I'm taking this and I'm putting our name over it.
Correct.
We're not modeling.
Right.
Here, we are referencing and saying other entities have done that. Your questioning continually goes back to a model. If we model it like Rochester, if we model it like this, we're referencing them as other department or other entities, governmental entities that have that have created such an office.
Which I
I
believe,
think
through the
we
chair, was
should-
my question, was what you knew about the Albany, the reference was Albany, did they allow the Albany County for this type of public information? Because we know that the city does not allow for those type of exceptions. As, back to Legislator Andrews' point in her open remarks, it's up to that office to decide what they can give information on, the same as our body, the same as our investigators have here through the county executive's office. And so my point being, as I've repeatedly stated through my question, what I've tried to state is that what we have in place here is very similar to what the city of Rochester already has, in that we have an investigative team that reports, takes information from whistleblowers, reports back to the county executive office, just like the city of Rochester model that reports back to the mayor's office. And so my point being, at what point do we need something different? And because Albany was referenced, I was asking if they had something different.
Mr.
And so
Chairman.
in that particular case, that's my point. So my point is, and all my other, is that as I like to state, I believe that we already have a system in place that fits what is being asked, except for that one piece of the puzzle, and we don't know of anybody else that has done that, and we know that the city of Rochester does it the way that we're currently doing it, where it's reported to the county executive. It's the job of the county executive to hire, fire, and discipline employees. It's not the job of the legislature. And so it's inherently going to be a role of the county executive. And I think that this is another layer of government that the people don't need or don't want. We already are doing this. We're already protecting the taxpayers through what we already have. So, Mr. Chairman, I will give back
Mr. Chairman,
the floor. I have no further questions.
I would like to respond to, no, I need to clarify a point. No, I'm sorry, I need to clarify this point
I'm
that,
sorry, turn her mic off.
no, that's
sorry.
not fair to
Yes, it is fair. I
Mr.
told you the
Chairman.
rules when we started.
But I have a final
You want
answer
to caucus with your
No,
committee?
I
Caucus
have a
with your
final
committee.
answer to his question, because the Rochester Office of Public, this is disputed. The Rochester
Well, if there was a
office-
question
there
asked,
was
I
a
apologize,
question.
then you can answer it.
There was a question about
I thought
the
it was a statement,
reports.
too.
Legislator Barker asked questions about the information that the Rochester Office of Public Integrity provides to its city council, I presume he meant, and the answer is that the Office of Public Integrity does prepare and submit annual reports summarizing its activities, which go to city council. And city council can also ask questions about the Office of Public Integrity and can also request that the director come and brief them. So that is drastically different than what is occurring currently in Monroe County, when the Independent Accountability Office does not come here and brief us, does not answer any questions, and we do not have access to the same information that the city council does in the city of Rochester. And I feel that is germane to the question Legislator
All right,
Barker is
I agree.
asking. Thank you.
Legislator Esposito, who's been patiently sitting there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to again thank Legislator Andrews for bringing what I think is a very prudent referral before this committee. I obviously intend to support it for many of the reasons she described. And regardless of whether or not we're referencing, we're modeling, or whatever it is we're talking about when we're looking at other places around our region, our state, our country, I think the point here is that enforcement of public integrity is a very vital aspect of government. It is one that I think, and that's a point I think we all would agree on. I don't think that this is an unnecessary or unwanted or extra layer of government. This proposal would provide for a more effective, from a point of view of operations and cost, model for enforcing public integrity. And I'd like to get to some comments and to flesh out a little bit more about what the county does have in place now, because I think that's very important. I think there are components of what this proposal tries to do that the county has attempted to address in response to various items that have occurred in the recent past and in the last few years that I do not want to make the point of this committee hearing. I want to talk about the process and what is the most appropriate way to try to enforce public integrity. So along those lines, I'd like to ask through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, why is it that when this proposal is announced a few weeks ago, well in advance of this committee and well in advance of even the referral deadline, that the response from this administration is that this idea is a non-starter.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not familiar with that comment or who made it. It certainly was not me, and I cannot presume to answer on behalf of someone who's not here.
Well, through you, Mr. Chairman, it was the county spokesperson.
Mr. Chairman, I can't speak for the county spokesman.
Mr. Chairman, through you, you are here to speak for the administration, correct? Is that the official position of this administration when it comes to this office of this proposed Office of Public Integrity?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not here to articulate an official position of the administration. This is a referral submitted by a legislator. The debate is among members of this committee, and I'm simply here to document any questions that there may be. The county attorney would probably be the most appropriate individual to respond to any specific questions. I'd be happy to convey those to him. But beyond that, I'm here to gather information and respond in an expeditious manner.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I might request in the future when we have matters where the spokesman's commented on an issue or the county attorney is the best person to ask questions, that we have them available at this committee. I'd like to then move on and sort of get to the nature of some of the conversation between Mr. Barker and Ms. Andrews about
Legislator Esposito, could I just interrupt you 1 second?
Of course.
And I apologize, but where did you see that comment? Because I didn't see that comment.
It was
and I'm pretty astute. I catch most everything.
It was in several media reports the day after we announced this proposal for consideration.
On television or on...
I don't recall if it was in print or on television.
I didn't see it in print, and I can tell you I didn't hear it on television because I watched Fox all the time.
I'm very confident those are the exact words. It was a non-starter, and that troubles me as a legislator who has something to consider, especially before my fellow legislators even have an opportunity to discuss it. So that's why I wanted to ask the administration while they're here, since this would obviously directly affect them, since some of these things are done by them. And to that point, a lot of, I think, the points that Mr. Barker just made were that the county's Independent Accountability Council or office, I'm not sure which it is, already does and performs a lot of this public integrity enforcement that we're talking about in this proposal. And through you, Mr. Chair, to the administration, can you confirm, is it Independent Accountability Council? Is it an Accountability Office? What is the official term, just so I make sure we have it right going forward?
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to attempt to answer that question if I don't know the exact answer. I am not part of the county attorney's office. This is not my referral. This is not the administration's referral. I would be glad to answer any questions that are directed to me from the county attorney's office. I am not the expert in the room.
Thank you. I can appreciate that. I realize that you're here as the representative for the administration. And in order for us to properly consider whether or not this is a necessary proposal, it would be helpful to have some light shed on what the administration is currently doing. Can I ask through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, the response that the administration has given this body to the various questions about what I will refer to as the Independent Accountability Council and not office, because it's my understanding, and if I'm wrong, I'd like to be corrected, that this is a contract with a private law firm. There is no office per se. There is no staff. There is no investigators. There are no auditors that work for the county or any county-related entity. It's my understanding this is a contract with a private law firm. But again, that's what I'd like to be corrected on if I'm incorrect. So I'd like to know who is the client with this Independent Accountability Council? Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration.
Mr. Chairman, I am not an attorney, and I am not a representative of the county attorney's office. This is not the administration's referral. If the legislator or members of his caucus were interested in asking these questions in the formulation of this legislation, they certainly could have, but I do not recall being consulted in the drafting of this referral.
Mr. Chairman, I have a letter here with 13 questions about these specific items related to the Independent Accountability Council, which is supposedly the entity that this body is entrusting with enforcement of public integrity. I think I'd like to request, if at all possible, to have someone from the county attorney's office join us today. Is that at all possible? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
I doubt it.
I don't believe that's possible, Mr. Chairman. The decision on this referral is up to the members of this committee.
Okay, I'll move on. I mean, I think my point is well made. That
who did that letter go to?
This letter went to Mr. Helfer, as a matter of fact. And we received a response saying all the information was privileged and confidential. The reason for my question about who is the client of the Independent Accountability Council is I want to know how a conversation or information that a private law firm can share with the county executive is not anything that this body is privy to, understanding that there may be some aspects of that information that are confidential, that might require us to go into executive session perhaps, but I want to know how it is that this county can have a contract with the law firm to enforce integrity, ethics, accountability, and none of that information is coming to this body. That's why I want to know who our client is, or who the client is, in terms of the contract between the law firm, the private law firm that is the Independent Accountability Council or office, and our government.
Mr. Helfer, do we contract with the law firm, or do we contract with Chesworth and Welch, is it?
I'm asking for who the we is, Mr. Chairman. I'm not as concerned with the private law firm. I want to know, is the we the county government? Or is the we county executive Maggie Brooks?
Well, certainly, Mr. Chairman, it's the County of Monroe. Now, the nature of that arrangement, I can't speak to that. I do not have a copy of the contract or any legal agreement in front of me. That would be a question for the county attorney. As Legislator Esposito noted, the letter did have my name on it. However, as he failed to note, the county attorney drafted the contents of that letter, and his signature is on the bottom of that letter.
That's terrific. Thank you. I would like to, at this time, through you, Mr. Chairman, request a copy of that contract. I can't imagine any reason why that wouldn't be something that this legislative body isn't entitled to. And I'd also like to make the point that I don't see any way, shape, or form where some of the basic information that Ms. Andrews alluded to earlier and is written in this letter is so confidential that it cannot be shared with this body. And if it needed to be an executive session, then so be it. But I think the point that needs to be made is that the ethics oversight that exists currently is insufficient. Whether it's insufficient to satisfy me as a legislator or Ms. Andrews or the body at large or the public at large is really inconsequential. It's not providing any accountability. It's just providing independent, private, apparently, counsel for the county executive, and that's not enough. That shouldn't be enough for any independently elected legislator who serves in a separate branch of government and wants to make sure that this government is operating and running as efficiently and free of incident of ethical violations as possible. So that's my request. I'd like that contract. I'd like as many of these questions that can be answered without breaking any privileged and confidential information to be reconsidered by the county attorney. And I'd love to have an opportunity to question him about this issue. I fear that this is our only opportunity to talk about this, and I'm disappointed that that's not happening right now. So forgive me. I will try to move on to some other aspects, although I worry that they're not going to be able to be answered either. Does the Independent Accountability Council, are they responsible for anything other than the whistleblower protection hotline? Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration.
Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to get an answer back to the committee members on that question and any other questions relating to the specific operation of that office or of that arrangement.
So then you wouldn't know if they're able to or do go out and perform proactive spot checks or audits of any county functions that are not called in through the whistleblower protection line. Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I do not personally know the answer to that question. I'd be happy to provide that information to the committee.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll move past the Independent Accountability Council since we're not seeming to get any answers. Is there also, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, a special counsel to the county executive for public authorities? Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration.
Mr. Chairman, I would have to get back to the committee with that information. I do not know that off the top of my head.
Mr. Chairman, without belaboring this, I'd like to make a motion that this referral be tabled until a time when this committee can convene and have the county attorney present. This is ridiculous to not be able to understand what the county does or does not do in public integrity enforcement when we have a very prudent, very serious proposal to change the nature of county government in this regard.
Tabling motion by Legislator Esposito, seconded by Legislator Eckel. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Motion fails.
Thank you for the vote. Not sure I understand how any legislator would not want to know the answer to some of these things. I'd like to move on a little bit more and talk about the second component of this referral, which I would especially like to commend, and that is the idea of a task force to have a regional office of public integrity. Obviously, I believe an office of public integrity is a good thing, and I think this is exactly the kind of foresight our community needs. There was a question posed to Legislator Andrews, I believe, as to whether or not this would envision the city's Office of Public Integrity being merged with the counties. That would certainly be my hope and desire, is that we could get to a place where we could share the resources of the various municipalities in this county, towns, villages, city, county, to have a regional Office of Public Integrity. Offices of Public Integrity are not becoming frivolous or extra headline-inducing entities in government. They're becoming standard operating procedure. And this county is lagging behind in not having one that is open and accountable to the public. And so for that reason, I think this proposal has extra merit to try to bring the people in this community, the governments in this community, together to give them an opportunity and a place to go before they have to go to their police departments and the district attorney and the slew of other agencies, both federal and state, that have had to investigate all levels of government in the recent past to try to address things proactively and on a policy-driven basis to preempt and avoid ethical violations and scandals and various levels of corruption. That is really a proposal that honestly could be considered on its own just to try to form. It's something as a new member of the Council of Governments that I intend to bring to that body to see if they'll embrace it independent of what happens here tonight. But I'd like to make that point. I think that's a terrific vision and foresight by Legislator Andrews and in this proposal, and it's something we should be working towards. We shouldn't have entities responsible for ethics oversight that we can't even get answers to, regardless of who's in the room. The idea here is to be transparent, accountable, and operate above board at a better standard, recognizing confidentiality exists in sensitive matters. But we need to make sure that our government is functioning in an ethical manner. And right now, I cannot say that it is, for multiple reasons.
You made a statement.
Yes.
State your reasons.
There's been a rash of incidents at various county entities in the past 2 years alone, whether they be authorities, local development corporations, nonprofit corporations, or among county employees.
Why do you feel that we're lagging behind?
Because in every one of those instances, there's been no place to go where this body has any idea if anything is being done to address that until the IRS, the FBI, the Attorney General, the Office of State Controller, the Authorities Budget Office, until they get involved. This legislative body actually hasn't even done anything. Mr. Gregory made the point in his public remarks that we have the ultimate responsibility and we can investigate and look into anything we want, and that's true. While the administration may have responsibility for managing and hiring and firing employees, this legislative body has full investigative powers to look into any inquiry we want. It doesn't happen. We need a separate entity that will do this, and we need one that is not direct law enforcement and prosecutorial. Those are my reasons. I'll summarize because we haven't been able to get the information we want, and we've been unwilling to table this conversation until a time when we can. I would just like to make very simply that this proposal would improve government operations, will save money by being cost-effective in what it spends to create the office, but also in the opportunities it will create to save taxpayer dollars from fraud that otherwise is not being caught. It is a standard operating procedure for government to now have an Office of Public Integrity. I believe this one does it better than a lot of other places that have started to do that by making it independent, where it's not responsible just to the executive, it's not responsible just to a legislature, and it's not hiding behind some attorney-client privilege. And this would help us have a place to create standards and to go to, and county employees to go to, before we get into the more serious criminal violations that we've seen, and embarrassing investigations that we've seen, and unbelievable loss of taxpayer dollars and public confidence. That's what this is about. I believe it's a good proposal. I intend to support it and hope my colleagues in this committee do as well.
Is there any further discussion? Legislator Eckel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, in response to your question, the DNC, February 25th, 2011, Monroe County, quote, Monroe County Integrity Unit proposed. Author was David Andretta, quote, was non-starter by county executive spokesman. I've been finding that in my past 5.5, almost 6 years on this body, that answers to our questions generally come through foils from the DNC or something like that. We can't get answers to our questions. We respond to problems in a reactive manner. If there is a problem, somebody who is bilking the government, somebody who's been doing it for a good long time, and we begin an investigation, we can only investigate from there on. If we had an Office of Public Integrity, perhaps an investigation could have been started much earlier, and we could have recouped a lot more money. In the Robitrad scandal, the guy has been admitted to doing this for about 10 years, but we can only investigate the last year because that's when we found out about it. We recovered about $100,000 to $200,000. Could we have recovered a lot more than that? That alone could fund this office if we're questioning about how much it's going to cost for funding. Being proactive and saving the money before we have to kill the canary in the coal mine. Why do we always have to depend on a canary to tell us when there's poison in the air? Why can't we find out ourselves?
Well, in the defense of the administration, we did find out ourselves.
I'm sorry, I have the floor. All our actions are in response to problems. All our actions and all of the reactions to that have been in response. We don't make actions, we don't take actions to preempt problems as we could possibly find them. We don't, all of these new rules and regulations, ethics training, etc., has been as a response. Why can't we find out these problems long before? The role of this legislature is to oversee the administration. It's the checks and balances. It is our job to question this, and this referral is us trying to do our job when we get no answers to problems that are happening and the potential to do something about it. How can our jobs be done? Questions such as number of cases opened by the council can't be answered to us. Number of cases opened. How many phone calls have you gotten? How many phone calls have you deemed untenable? Number of investigations open. These aren't questions about who's being investigated. These are questions just asking what's going on. And how can we do our job in the role of the legislature as somebody who wants to be here in government and believe in that government when we don't get answers to questions as simple as that? I don't see this. This is a headline. This referral is a potential headline reducing entity, and I think that's something that the county needs. To allow us to investigate and find out our own things before the public has to find out from a newspaper report or something they've uncovered. Our investigatory unit seems to have been the news in the past several years. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Eckel. I tend to disagree with several of the things you said, and you completely ignored the things that we are doing good. So that's my opinion about your statement, that's all. We just reiterated them for the last half hour, 45 minutes. Oh, that's... Legislator Howland.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I've sat here and listened to many statements, and God help me if I could speak as well as the legislators across the row from us. But I always try to define things down to facts. And one of the statements I heard was, the Office of Integrity is a standing operating procedure for governments today. I heard that stated twice. And I would like to ask Legislator Esposito, how many towns have an Office of Integrity?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm sure there are not many. I should clarify my statement. I would like to say it's becoming a standard operating procedure, and one that I think Monroe County should lead the way on. I think a government this size with this many resources should have it as standard operating procedure to have an entity that's independent and accountable and open to legislative body alike to enforce public integrity. So I don't know the answer to your question about towns or villages or smaller entities. I doubt there are many, but I think
counties?
I don't have figures. I just know that there are many entities like the ones that were referenced in the debate between Legislator Barker and Legislator Andrews where it's happening, and it's happening more and more. It's a conversation that's happening all across our state at every level. And it's never a retrenchment. It's never saying we're doing it good enough. It's always talking about how we can improve ethics oversight. And that was the point of my statement when I say it is becoming standard operating procedure for government. So I apologize if I misspoke or if it didn't come across that way.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, but this is the difficulty I have when people present facts as being, or a belief as being a fact, that this is a standard operating procedure for all governments. And yet when you say, tell me where these people, these governments are so we can look at what they're doing, well, out of the counties in New York, maybe there's 2 or 3. So it's not a standard operating procedure. And I just wanted to make that correction, and I appreciate you making that correction. The other thought, well, many thoughts occurred to me, but I'll keep it short. One was that a county spokesperson said it was a dead on arrival. Well, I can assure you the official position of Legislator John Howland is it was not dead on arrival. I've looked into Section 8 of the county law. I've looked into Legislator Andrews' proposal. I've looked at what the county is doing already, and I see a lot of dovetailing of what is being asked for and what's already being done. And I think that leaves, to go back to the idea of a reference or an inference, it will lead the public to believe that because we're asking to do these things or because you're asking to do these things, then we're not doing them now, or maybe we're doing 80 or 90% of them. And I think that sells this legislature short for the things that they are doing right. And the other thing that concerned me was this discussion, we use this as a model or we use this as a reference in some of the articles that appeared in the papers in different places. Whether it's a model, the word is model or reference, if you're stating this is not being done by us and Albany County as our reference is doing something different, even though you don't state that they're not doing it either, the inference from what you say is that, yes, we're going to change it, Albany's doing it, and we're going to do it like them. So it's not an idea of modeling and referencing. It's more of an inference. We're going to look at what Albany County's doing because they do it better. Well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Nobody proved it here. Okay? So once again, it goes back to, I like to look at the facts. I enjoy hearing you speak in broad terms, but when we go down and look at exactly what's going on and what's written on paper, it isn't always what I hear in this chamber. And that's all I wanted to say, is that I think I wanted to make the statement that I am impressed much more with facts and hard facts than I am with beliefs and thoughts and I think and we think or statements like that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Opposed. Motion fails. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? Legislator Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On a similar topic to the one we just had a lengthy debate about, I'd like to bring to the attention of this committee an issue and also ask a question related to it. Our staff office received an email recently from the county's Human Resources Department requesting information about participation in an ethics training program that the county executive announced last month. And it says there's a window of opportunity that's closing with regards to our ability to participate in that ethics training. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I want to make you aware as chairman of this committee that last week one of my colleagues, the minority leader, Ted O'Brien, introduced a referral that would require and ask this legislative body to work with the administration to have legislators participate in the same ethics training that all county employees are now required to be a part of.
I have not seen that.
You have not seen that. And that troubles me a little bit. We introduced it as a matter of importance and received a response from the president that said it was not timely. And yet, the next day, I believe, we got an email saying our window of opportunity is closing, and if we don't act, we're going to incur a charge. And so I wanted to know if that's something that this committee should be discussing or looking into or that you should be aware of for a couple of reasons. One is this committee is the proper body to discuss what ethical involvement this legislative branch should have at the county government.
Could I interrupt 1 second? Ms. Herman, I just wanted to mention something. I noticed when you stepped down from the podium, and I was going to wait till the end, but you seem to be leaving, you went over and looked at the name tags. Those name tags do not identify the people that are sitting there. Sure.
Are always helpful, Chairman. I love it.
Well, I didn't want somebody to be misquoted.
So I'd ask that the members of this body follow up on this email and why it is that the county's HR department is directing legislators to do something when this body hasn't even approved it yet. And I'd ask that you talk to the president about the referral that was introduced and that we get that from this committee and discuss it as quick as possible. And I guess I'd just like to also ask through you to the administration, what is the cost referred to in this email? Because it was my understanding when the county executive announced her county employee ethical training program that it was at no cost to the county.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not familiar with the costs that you're referring to. As you know, I'm not from the Department of Human Resources, but I'd be glad to look into that. I'm not familiar with the email you're referring to.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I mean, I think it's a very good idea that this legislative body join the rank and file members of county government in participating in ethics training. I think that's a very important thing for us all to go through regularly. But I just want to make sure that we're maintaining the proper separation of powers with regards to the legislative branch's authority to set up its own rules and determine what it thinks its members should be doing. So thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Legislator Esposito. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? Seeing none, there being no further business, the March 21st, 2011 meeting of the Agenda Charter Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Agenda Charter Committee is scheduled for Monday, April 25th at 5:30 p.m. Thank you.